Show. Yeah, that's right. Welcome in, welcome back, folks, to a 5 questions I have for the upcoming initial college football playoff 12-team rankings. This is an exciting time of the year. Nobody knows how this is going to go. We've all been looking forward to it for a long, long time. How is this committee going to go about aligning these teams? Edition of the Always Irish Show. Where does Notre Dame fall? Oh, it's going to be interesting. As always, thanks for being here. You can find the program on YouTube. Do it, subscribe if you haven't yet. Appreciate it very much. Give the video a thumbs up. That helps Johnny out as well. Notifications on it way you don't miss nothing. Twitter, search bar Always Irish, rat, Always Irish Shake. Emails alwaysirishhinty@gmail.com. Audio only. Anywhere you want it, you can get it. If you don't want to see my face, ain't nobody going to blame you for that one. I don't want to see it either. Call-in lines, 312-900-8815. Dial it up, tell Uncle Yanni boy all you've heard and seen. Notre Dame Fighting Irish, brought to you by Sports Illustrated. Read all about it, folks. Read all about it every single day of your life. Patreon.com/Always Irish. He the former captain. He the leading tackler. It's Mike Goolsby and myself breaking it all down. All right. Hope you all had an enjoyable weekend. No Notre Dame football. You could relax, have your rooting interests for and against certain teams, whatever you are watching. But it's just good for my blood pressure to be able to watch football all weekend. And it wasn't life or death for me. It was just enjoyable. So now we're back. And coming out later in a few hours, you're going to have this first college football 12-team ranking. After all the years of the build-up and all of the what is the format going to be and all of this and that, you're finally here. And I got a lot of questions about how this is going to go, where Notre Dame's going to fall within this, how are they going to look at different things, and let's get into it, okay? So here's some bullet points. Number one is, the first and the last set of rankings are by far the most important in this project. The last one, for obvious reasons, because you're going to find out who's where and who's in the tournament or not. But the first one is so important because that is the first time you are going to learn how these people are thinking about this project. It's the first chance you're going to get to see how this committee processes the information in front of them. What do they value? What do they not value? What conferences do they value or not? What trends are there? What are they valuing or penalizing? Is a good win worth more than a bad loss? We don't have any of this data. And so this is your first chance to find a foundational ground footing level to be able to understand what these people prioritize and how they're going to look at this field. Now, I got to admit, we're off to a bad start. What do you mean we're off to a bad start? Nothing's happened yet. No. You're off to a bad start already because you put Ward Manuel in charge of this whole project and he has no integrity or morals. So right away, I am predisposed to not trust this committee, and I'm predisposed to think they will operate with no integrity. And you could think that's crazy or whatever, but you got to explain to me this. How disconnected are you from the real world that you have this multi-billion-dollar new expanded playoff operation? The biggest part of it is the seeding of the 12 teams in this committee. And when they needed a director of this, they went to Michigan's AD while he was actively being investigated for multiple college football scandals. That's the guy this group went to and said, we want you to lead this committee. No morals, no integrity right off the bat. So I'm expecting malfeasance. I'm expecting games to be played. I am expecting no integrity. Because you proved to me you already don't value that by putting this guy in charge. I don't even think there is a comeback to that. I don't even think there's an argument on the other side of mine. How could the powers that be putting this all together, and then you go to that guy And no one in this room, all these rich, powerful conference players, all these important people, no one said, wait a second. What sort of message are we sending the country that we're putting Ward Manuel in charge of this while he's being investigated for multiple very, very ugly scandals? Some on the field, and I would argue the off the field one, there's one of them off the field that's way more serious than anything Connor Stallions did. So I'm already expecting them not to operate with integrity based off that decision. No one else in the room said, this is a bad look. We can't put this guy in charge. No one said that. So I automatically, my default is to not trust these people. Number two, how is this committee, how are they going to value 1 to 2 loss teams over 0 or 1 loss teams, but with vastly different difficulties of schedule? How are you going to value like a 2-loss SEC team, but the 2 losses are to pretty good teams or whatever, over a 1-loss team from a lower level conference or a Notre Dame? That's a big deal. Once you start getting into a scenario where you have 2-loss teams ahead of 1 or no loss teams, that gets interesting, because then that tells me that you're valuing that strength of schedule more than just winning. How does that come into play? Or how about this one? How would they value like a Big 12 Iowa State with 1 loss, an SMU ACC team with 1 loss, and a Notre Dame team with 1 loss that's horrible? How are they going to value those out? How are they going to parse those out? So that's a big question I have. It's going to tell you a lot. If you ended up with like a 2-loss SEC team ahead of a 1-loss somebody else, that tells you a lot about who they value and what conferences and all this. Is there anything in this first set of rankings that makes you feel like they're really, really leaning heavily towards the Big Ten and the SEC over the lower conferences or Notre Dame? I don't know. I'm just asking. And I'm not even necessarily saying that shouldn't be the case. I'm just asking if it is going to be the case and there's a trend. There's no doubt that I think a week-to-week SEC schedule is a lot tougher than whatever the Big 12 is playing. So how do they start balancing that out? I'm looking for some consistent logic. That's the next thing here. I'm looking for some consistent logic. Follow me here. Can't get enough unfiltered Notre Dame football talk? Be sure to go over to patreon.com/alwaysirish. Former captain Mike Goolsby and myself. Do that. Screw it.
Oh, we never won anything. It's been 30 years.
Too many times in the 4-team playoff era, you would sit there and they'd do their weekly rankings for the 4 teams or whatever. And one week they'd get up there and go, we got this team here because of this strength of this schedule and the strength of record and this blah, 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 this reasoning. That's why we did it. Then the next week, games are played, things change. The same guy comes back on TV and they have a totally different reason and rationale for valuing something over something else than they did the week before. They had these philosophical inconsistencies in what they allegedly valued or penalized or propped up or whatever. In a 4-teamer, they couldn't keep it consistent. How in the world are they going to be able to maintain consistent through lines of logic and apply it to set up 12 when they couldn't even do it with 4? Every week that dork got up there and answered the questions, he had a different reason and rationale for what they did. How are you going to be able to keep this all straight with 12 teams, not just 4? How is this committee going to value and compare big wins versus bad losses? What matters more to them? The good wins you have or a bad loss? Could that come into play for Notre Dame? Speaking of Notre Dame, One of the issues Notre Dame fans need to accept openly is you probably have the worst loss of anybody being considered for the playoff field. Is there anybody that's being considered that has a worse loss than to Northern Illinois at home when you're favored by 78 points? Does anybody have a worse loss? I'm asking. Anybody that's being talked about of maybe being in this field, does any of them have a worse loss than that? Just asking. So what makes this tough in the Notre Dame case is I could argue they have the worst loss of anybody that's competing to be in this field and the most difficult schedule to gauge because you're not in a conference and it's not just clearly obvious where you stack up. Something else that makes it tough for Notre Dame is your best win just got knocked down a peg. Yes, A&M still only has the one conference loss. They could very well make the SEC championship and win it or whatever. But there's no doubt Notre Dame's best win just took a hit. Because A&M got worked over. It wasn't even close. They got worked over against a average, very average, literally by record average South Carolina team. So what weighs out? How bad? Listen, the Northern Illinois loss is not just a regular loss. A bunch of people on my morning shows, you got to get over it. Let Northern Illinois go. You can't because it doesn't just go bye-bye. That is not a run-of-the-mill loss. The Northern Illinois, it's like a shadow. It follows you around. There are consequences to this that don't exist if you just play a good team and fall short by a field goal. This is different. Not all losses are the same. This one is different, and you need to be open and accept that. How much does that loss end up hurting Notre Dame? How much credit does Notre Dame get for the wins they have? The A&M win still looks good. Louisville win looks better after they beat Clemson, actually. How much credit you going to get for a Navy-Army situation? I don't know. So there's a lot going on here. And there's a lot to consider. And I don't know where Notre Dame's going to fall. In this first ranking, I have no idea. I 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't quite know what to expect. I'm not looking at the AP poll and carrying that over. I don't know what to expect. Here's the thing though. Yeah, I know Notre Dame's good for TV. We all know that. They put butts in the seats. We know. It's hard for me to think a committee headed up by Ward Manuel of Michigan and all these lifelong conference-affiliated people. It's hard for me to imagine any scenario where they want to do Notre Dame any favors. Not only for this year, but bigger picture. If I had to guess how this was going to go, here's my guess. When Notre Dame's deserving of making the playoff, they're going to make the playoff. That way the committee, they do the right thing and they got Notre Dame and the TV brand and all Notre Dame stuff in there for their money and it benefits them. They can't get accused of being against Notre Dame and leaving them out at the field, whatever. So what I expect is them to put Notre Dame in the field when they deserve it, but to do everything they can to make the road as miserable as possible. So I'm talking about, yeah, Notre Dame could be in the field, but we're going to give them the toughest bracket matchups you can and do everything they can to avoid giving Notre Dame a round one home game. That's how I would suspect this group of people that is predisposed to not like and respect Notre Dame will go about it. They know they can't leave Notre Dame out if Notre Dame deserves it, and it's good business to have Notre Dame in it. They know that, and they'll honor that. But once that hurdle's cleared, then they'll go out of their way to make it tough on Notre Dame. Bad bracket matchups, try and keep them out of the 5 to 8 so they don't get to host. That'd be my guess. That would be my guess. So I'm not sure what we're going to get. I'm just not sure how this committee's going to go about their business. And I just have no idea right now what they value or what they're going to penalize. I have no idea. But I do know this. When you lose to Northern Illinois, you open yourself up to you're going to get what you're going to get. And I know they haven't lost since and all that. We all know that. When you lose to Northern Illinois at home and you look at the other team's losses, some of them are bad and ugly. They're not Northern Illinois bad and ugly. Any major power conference loss is better than a Northern Illinois loss just by default. So, I'm just telling you, there are consequences when you lose to Northern Illinois beyond just that 1 week you feel bad. There are long-term consequences. So, I don't know what to expect. We'll see what we're going to get. And then Notre Dame just needs to keep winning, and then whatever's going to happen in front of us is going to happen, and you move up, hopefully, and into a good spot. But I cannot, by default, trust any committee with Ward Manuel in charge. Just on its surface, that tells me there's no integrity going on here. That you approach that guy to head all this up when he's being investigated for multiple scandals. It blows my mind that no one in this room thought that would be a bad look for credibility to have this guy in charge of it. It shows you the low moral standard that these people operate with. No one in that room said, wait a second. We can't put this guy in charge. It looks like he's running a dirty program and covering up multiple scandals. We're putting him in charge. No one said that. They're all fine with it. That tells you what you're dealing with right off the bat. So I expect the worst from these people that set this up, and we'll see what we're going to get. But when you lose to Northern, you lose controlling your own destiny. We'll see what we get. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to check out the merchandise. The link is in the description. You can browse and carouse all the different Always Irish gear. Make sure you head over there and get something for the next tailgate. Thanks for being here.